About a week and a half ago, the San Antonio Spurs beat the Miami Heat for the NBA, National Basketball Association Championship. And this team has won 5 championships in the last 15 years or so. And next to Detroit Pistons, I think San Antonio is my favorite team in the NBA. But I was online on NBA.com, and they had an interview with Tony Parker, their star guard. And I found it very interesting, some of the comments that Tony Parker made regarding his team. Like San Antonio has 3 main star players that have been together for a long time. And each of those players could make a lot more money playing for another team. And Tony Parker acknowledged this, and he says that's true, but the 3 players would rather win championships. He went on to say that the players, those 3 players and the other players on the team, they really trust Gregg Popovich, the coach, the head coach, and the president of the basketball operations for San Antonio. And this team, I think of any sports team, there needs to be a level of trust to exist between players and between the players and the coaching staff and the management. There has to be chemistry, and I think in basketball especially, just the nature of the game. And a lot of times you'll see a team that's maybe got more talent, more flashy, be overcome by a team that does have that chemistry, that does have the trust and the loyalty. And San Antonio, I just believe, plays basketball the way it should. And it's been a team characterized by hard work and selflessness over the years. And I believe that the mold for this team and the way they play the game's not only been set by Gregg Popovich, the head coach and the president of basketball operations, but also by David Robinson, who was a longtime center for the San Antonio Spurs. He was nicknamed the Admiral because he was drafted out of I think it was Navy, military school. And Dave Robinson played for many years as the captain of the San Antonio Spurs. And I believe that his influence still reverberates through the halls of San Antonio's basketball arena. David Robinson happened to be a strong Christian, and he was not ashamed to profess that he was a Christian. And he mentored their present center, Tim Duncan, and they had a strong relationship with each other over the years as really Tim Duncan was groomed by David Robinson to take over. And I believe that, I share this as an example, that I really believe that trust and selflessness and mutual respect are crucial ingredients in most areas of life. Like if you're going to be in a healthy, strong work environment, there needs to be some of those ingredients present. If not, that environment is going to be toxic. Those kind of ingredients like mutual respect, mutual deference, loyalty, trust need to be present in all of those relationships in our life that really matter. In our husband-wife relationships. If we want to experience God's purposes, there has to be that mutual deference, that loyalty, that trust. Also in parent-child relationships, for those to thrive and experience God's purposes, you need those kind of ingredients to be present. And you need those things present, like even on a basketball team, even on a football team. And even like the Miami Heat, they got beat by San Antonio this year. They won the championship last year and the year before. And they got more star power on their team, but still, for them to win the championship for those 2 years was just not on star power. They needed a chemistry. They needed a mutual respect, a deference, and their 3 main players worked together like that. They put their egos to the side and played like a team. In our passage, like in Ephesians 5 in verses 22 to 33, I believe that it's no accident that just prior to this rich passage on the marriage relationship, that it's prefaced by verse 21. And I want to read verse 21 of Ephesians 5. It says, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ." Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. I believe that this verse not only emphasis on the marriage relationship, But then in Ephesians 6, verses 1 to 4, Paul talks about the parent-child relationship. And then in verses 5 to 9, he talks about the employer-employee relationship. And I really believe that verse 21 of Ephesians 5 is an introduction to all those important relationships in our life. Those relationships that really make up a large part of our lives. And I think it's especially important for husbands, parents, and employers to realize that submission is not a one-way street. It's not a one-way street. It's something that even a star like Tim Duncan, who's probably been the best basketball player in the last 15, 17 years overall, still needs to take into account. And he has done that. He has had a deferential attitude, a mutual respect attitude that has made him easy to work with. And if we want to be the dads or the moms, if we want to be the employers, if we want to be the parents that God has made us to be and be used by God, that is the kind of attitude we need ourselves. Even though in those positions God has delegated us a real, very real authority, that doesn't mean we exercise that authority in a tyrannical way, in an authoritarian way. But it means that we are called to be servant leaders. The attitudes and the actions of mutual deference and respect are incumbent. I believe the way God's designed, and I know Chelsea and Frank are getting married, and I think this can be very useful for them. I believe it can be useful for all of us. But I really believe that the attitudes and the actions of mutual deference and respect are incumbent on husbands and wives, on employers and employees, parents and children. Those kind of attitudes are needed by both parties in a relationship. And the way that is going to be expressed, though, in the relationship is going to be a little different through the husband compared to the wife. The way that mutual deference and respect and submission is going to be a little different in how it's expressed through the employer compared to the employee, with the parent compared to the child, because the responsibilities of each of those people in those relationships are different. Like, for example, let me read the parent-child relationship in verses 1 to 4 of Ephesians 6. Like, this whole series that we're coming to a close this week and next week, it's all about a biblical view of relationships and human sexuality. And one of the things that I've been really trying to emphasize is that sex, the act of sex, has to be put in the context of male and female sexuality, which is more than just the act of sex. And that the way we express our sexuality is more than just through the act of sex that our culture tries to drum into our heads. The reason why there is so much brokenness and alienation in our society is because we have such a truncated view of how God has blessed us with our sexuality as male and female. And also, like today, I'm going to be talking about relationships. I really believe that as we learn to practice relationships in the different arenas of our life in a mutually respectful, mutually deferential way, it will cause us to be maturing as emotional people, maturing in a relational way where we will be able to healthily engage and express our sexuality in its many forms, and use it in a way that honors God and blesses other people. If I practice my sexuality in a way where I'm just thinking about myself and my good, I am going to cause a lot more alienation and pain in other people's lives, especially in this area, because our sexuality is a deep part of who we are as humans. And that's why God has designed it to be protected by marital vows and marital promises, because it is something where we become so vulnerable to another person, something that can be such a great blessing, but also cause such great pain. And that's why God's desire is for it to be protected by a marriage covenant where people make vows and promises to each other. And so I'm going to digress a little bit here in talking about parent-child relationships, but I really believe that as we learn to practice in these different areas, relationships in the way God desires it, we are going to be able to experience God's blessing in this other area of expressing our sexuality. So let's look at the parent-child relationship in Ephesians 6. It says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." I don't think parents should apologize or feel guilty that they are delegated with authority from God. Parents have an important job. Like here it says, and this is talking to Christian parents, and I believe that if even someone who's not a Christian wants to experience God's blessing in their relationship with their children, they need to heed. I think Christians are more equipped because we have the Spirit of God within us. We have the instructions of God's Word here. But we are delegated with authority, but we are not to exercise that authority in an unconditional way, in a way that's tyrannical. It's in a way that represents God. But the thing is, we're to do it in a way that doesn't exasperate our children. It's to be done in deference, in respect of our children. We're not to disrespect our children and just treat them like they're objects, but as people, little people. And the way we talk to them, the way we correct them is with respect. In the same way, the parent's called to be a servant leader. We see the same pattern in the employer-employee relationship. The children are to be respectful to their parents. They're to learn to obey kids, that it may go well with them. Like if a child does not learn to respect their parent, when they get to work or when they play on a sports team, if they haven't respected that first important person in their life, their mother and father, how are they going to be respectful in the workplace? How are they going to be respectful on a sports team? They're not. God's design is seen there, is the way you're to learn to be respectful and learn to recognize God-given authority through your mother and father. And hopefully you had the blessing of having a mom and dad that wanted to represent God and Jesus, who is the ultimate servant leader. The same pattern, as I mentioned, is seen in the employer-employee relationship in verses 5 to 9 of Ephesians 6. Let me read it. It says, "Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear, and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. Obey them not only to win their favor when their eye is on you, but like slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart. Serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving the Lord and not men, because you know that the Lord will reward everyone for whatever good he does, whether he's slave or free. And then masters, treat your slaves in the same way. Do not threaten them, since you know that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and there's no favoritism with him." See, they have a different roles in that relationship, but they are called both to be respectful of each other, to act in deference to each other. Like in the time of this writing, in the first century in the Roman Empire, it's been chronicled that 60 million slaves existed in the Roman Empire. They basically made up the workforce. It included not only house servants and manual laborers, but educated people as well, like doctors, teachers, and administrators. So basically, if you didn't own land or you were a part of the aristocracy or whatever, you were a slave. And so like this master-slave relationship, I believe like the modern, like today's equivalent is the employer-employee relationship. And it's amazing how it's so relevant. It's teaching, if you're an employee, it says do the best from your heart, not only when your employer is watching you. Do it as unto Christ. Do it with mutual deference, mutual respect. Don't steal your pay and do the very least. Be respectful of your job. And then it says to the master, treat your employees, treat your slaves like as equals. Like you and him have the same master. With deference, respect. Christianity in the first century, in its embryonic age, it didn't directly attack the institution of slavery, but verses like Ephesians 6:9 sowed the seed which germinated in the abolition of slavery. We have the little one-chapter book of Philemon buried in the back of the New Testament. And Philemon was a wealthy landowner. And Paul was in jail. Paul, earlier in his life, led Philemon to the Lord. He was a Christian, wealthy man. And this whole book of Philemon centers around Onesimus. Onesimus is a slave, a runaway slave of Philemon, who somehow Paul got into touch with when he was in jail. Onesimus was converted to Christ when he met Paul in jail. And Paul is sending Onesimus back to Philemon. And he's saying to Philemon, don't punish him. He could kill him. Like that slave owner at that time could kill that slave for running away. But look at what Paul says in Philemon 16. He says, have Onesimus back, no longer as a slave, but better than a slave, as a dear brother. He's very dear to me, but even dearer to you, both as a man and as a brother in the Lord. Do you see what's happening? How transformative this is, what he's saying, how revolutionary. He's saying, don't treat him as a chattel, as an object, as an impersonal thing. He's your brother. He's a man who's created with the same value as you are. And so welcome him back. That relationship didn't change where all of a sudden Onesimus became the landowner and Philemon the slave. No, that didn't change. But you know what church tradition says? That in this area where Philemon lived, about 20 years after this, 25 years after Philemon was written, there was a bishop of the church named Onesimus. And you know what happened? Onesimus, the former runaway slave who was converted to Christ, became the bishop of the local area in the church. And we see that how the transformative power of the gospel and how it really impacts relationships and how we deal with one another. And we're called to mutual deference and mutual submission. And if we want to experience God's purposes, God's best, it would behoove us to pay close attention to this. I believe that God calls us in all our relationships to do this. Jesus said in John 13, verse 34 and 35, he says, a new command I give you, love one another. Just as I have loved you, love one another. By this all men will know you are my disciples. And that word for love, agape, that self-giving love, is a real picture of who God is. And that word, if you look in the first century literature outside the Bible, is not even found. Christians took that word and filled it with meaning to teach what they were being taught by God and by Jesus, what God is like. If you want to know what God is like, look at Jesus. And it's interesting in this marriage relationship that we read about in Ephesians 5 in verse 31 when it talks about how a man is to love his wife as Christ loved the church. In verse 31 of Ephesians 5 it says, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, so he's saying this is a profound mystery. Like, what I think he's saying there is that, the marital relationship is designed by God to reveal what God has done in Jesus. Just as a man leaves his father and mother to join with his wife to become one, Jesus came out of the Trinity, the Son, and became a man and gave himself up and joined himself with humanity, first of all in his person. Christians believe he's fully God and fully man. And then in his life, death, and resurrection, join us to God through what he did on the cross to make us one with him. And so the marital relationship is to reflect the relationship to reflect what God has done in Jesus through the new covenant in getting us reconciled with God. And I believe not only that, but it's a picture of the Trinity, the relationship that has existed with God from eternity past. We believe in one God, one substance, one essence. We're monotheists, strongly affirmed in the New Testament, but we believe that God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit have mutually indwelt one another, mutually given themselves over to each other, mutually deferred to one another, poured themselves out to one another. The Father has eternally begotten the Son, according to John 1, gave himself fully to the Son, and the Son has returned fully himself to the Father in the Holy Spirit. The Trinity is a mystery. The Trinity is a mystery, but it's been revealed by Jesus coming to the earth out of the Trinity. And you know what? What kind of life did Jesus show in his earthly life? He gave himself. He kept giving himself. Just like the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. And the marriage relationship is to reflect that. The husband has got a delegated authority. He's called to be a servant leader. The wife is called to support the husband. But that's not like one is the boss and the other one's a doormat. No way. We're both called to mutually defer to one another, mutually to submit to each other, mutually to give of ourselves one over to one another. And when we experience that kind of relationship in your marriage, even the whole physical relationship in the marriage takes on a whole different meaning. A lot of times our media likes to put on a pedestal a porn star or somebody that's very promiscuous with many different partners sexually. You know what? That person doesn't have a clue what sex is all about. And I really believe that the husband and wife that have learned to communicate with one another and have learned to love each other and share their life together emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, who are truly becoming one, the whole physical relationship in that marriage takes on a great meaning. The marriage, that part of the relationship that God has protected, wants to protect it with vows and promises, because it's a deep part of you that you're sharing. And you're very vulnerable. And the reason why there's so much brokenness in our society today and alienation in this area, people totally reject God's design and purposes for it. They don't have a clue what the purpose of it is. It is a way to reproduce kids. It's a way to address the loneliness of a man and a woman. But there is purposes that transcend that picture what Jesus did in his life, death, and resurrection. And also, it's a picture of the relationship within the Trinity. God is one, but the Father and the Son have mutually indwelt each other for eternity in the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit is to be a part of our relationship. Here in Ephesians 5, before the teaching on the husband-wife relationship, employer-employee relationship, parent-child, and even before it says submit to one another out of reverence for Christ, what does verse 18 say? Of Ephesians 5. It says, be filled with the Spirit. See, the way we do this is in the Spirit of God. Just like the Father has emptied himself into the Son, and the Son has emptied himself into the Father from eternity past, the believer has the Holy Spirit indwelling them. And so what enables us to serve one another, to love one another, to grow in selflessness, to grow in unity with each other, and unity with God through Christ, is the Holy Spirit. The marriage relationship is to be in the Spirit. And all of our relationships are to be in the Spirit. We are to keep on being filled with the Spirit of God each day. Yield ourselves to the Spirit of God who's in us. Let Him have control of us, guide us, grow in servanthood. You know, marriage is not meant to be joined together by chains, but by thousands of threads that get tied together by God to make a beautiful tapestry between a husband and wife, to join and to become one. When we do that, we experience God's best. And you know what? You don't have to be married to experience the richness of relationships, because we have lots of different areas of relationship where we can practice the giving of ourselves to others and others towards ourselves. And that's what the local church is called to be. And that's how we can reflect Christ and who God is. And the world needs to know what God is like. This is the good news of Jesus Christ. Amen.